50 pounds of sweet potatoes, one trash bag, $2, and a method that Amish farmers have quietly been using for generations, while the rest of us were out here buying $40 grow bags and still pulling up handfuls of skinny, stringy little potatoes not even worth peeling. I'm going to show you the entire system today, start to finish, the exact way an old order Amish gardener would build it, with nothing but what's already sitting in a shed or under a sink. No fancy equipment, no mail-order fertilizer, no greenhouse, just soil, sun, a bag, and patience. And by the time we get to the harvest reveal near the end of this video, you are going to understand why this simple, humble, almost embarrassingly cheap method consistently outperforms raised beds that cost hundreds of dollars to build. So stay with me, because I promise you, the way this bag looks when you finally tip it over is not something you're going to want to miss. And I mean that. Now, before we touch a single slip, before we even talk about soil, I need you to understand the mindset behind this, because the mindset is really the whole secret. See, when you watch how Amish families garden, you notice something right away. They don't garden for hobby. They garden because it has to work. There's no backup trip to the grocery store if the harvest fails. There's no forgiving budget to just try again next year with better equipment. Everything is built around efficiency, around using what you already have, around working with the plant's natural behavior instead of fighting against it. And that philosophy, that quiet, patient, no-waste approach, is exactly what makes the trash bag sweet potato method work so well. It's not a gimmick. It's not a viral trick with no substance behind it. It is applied plant biology dressed up in the simplest possible container, the same way generations of frugal, self-reliant growers have been doing it long before anyone filmed a gardening video. So let's talk about the actual problem first, because you need to understand this before anything else makes sense. Sweet potatoes are not polite plants. They are not tidy little root vegetables that sit obediently where you plant them. They are aggressive, sprawling, opportunistic growers that send their tubers out in every direction, following whatever path offers the least resistance underground. In open garden soil, that path is almost always horizontal. The tubers spread wide, spread shallow, and scatter unpredictably. Some end up 3 feet from where you planted the slip. Some follow old root channels left behind by last year's plants. And what you end up with, more often than not, is a messy, scattered harvest. A dozen tiny potatoes here, a few decent ones over there, and a whole lot of wasted space and wasted effort for a fraction of the yield you were hoping for. Now here's the shift. Here's the piece of understanding that changes everything once it clicks. When you grow inside a contained space, like a heavy-duty bag, you create a physical wall. The tubers hit that wall and they can't keep spreading outward. They have nowhere to go but down into the deepest, richest, most oxygen-rich part of the growing medium. That forced downward growth is what concentrates your harvest into one dense, heavy column, instead of scattering it across 4 feet of garden bed. Instead of 20 small, disappointing potatoes spread all over the place, you get 8, 10, sometimes 15 large, dense tubers packed tightly into a single bag. That's not magic. That's not luck. That is basic plant physiology working exactly the way an old-fashioned, resourceful gardener would want it to work, using a container that costs less than a cup of coffee. Now I want you to do something for me right now before we go any further. Drop a comment and tell me where in the world you're watching this from. City, countryside, apartment balcony, small backyard, I don't care where. I want to know, because this method genuinely works in every climate, every growing zone, every country, whether you've got 2 acres or a tiny concrete patio. And somebody scrolling through these comments later this week is going to see your location and realize, if they can do it there, I can do it here too. So don't be shy. Type it in. Let's build a map of gardeners all doing this together. All right, let's get into it. Let's build this system the way it's meant to be built, step by careful step, the way someone who actually depends on their harvest would build it. First, the bag itself. And I want to be honest with you, this is where most people who try this method quietly fail before they even realize it. They grab whatever thin bag is sitting under the sink, poke a couple of holes in it with a fork, dump some dirt in, and then wonder 3 months later why their harvest was underwhelming. That's not how you do this if you actually want results. You want a heavy-duty, contractor-grade bag, not a flimsy kitchen bag. Kitchen bags are thin. They're made to be used once and thrown away. They tear under the weight of wet soil. They break down fast in direct sunlight. And they simply cannot handle the pressure of tubers expanding underground for 4 months straight. A contractor bag, on the other hand, is built to carry real weight. It'll hold 40–50 pounds of soil without splitting. It's thick enough to survive a full season outdoors in the sun. And here's the beautiful part, the part that would make any thrifty, self-sufficient gardener smile. These bags cost less than $2 at almost any hardware store or dollar store near you. That's your entire container budget, $2. Now let me pause here for a second because I think this matters more than most gardening channels ever admit. There's a reason old order growers rarely chase the newest gadget, the newest fertilizer blend, the newest raised bed kit advertised online. It's because they've learned, generation after generation, that the plant doesn't actually care about any of that. The plant cares about drainage, sunlight, root depth, and nutrient balance. That's it. Strip away every shiny product and every marketing claim, and you're left with those 4 things. And once you accept that, this entire method stops feeling like a shortcut and starts feeling like exactly what it is, the most direct path to a real harvest, with nothing standing in between you and the result. Now, drainage. This is the step almost every quick tutorial skips right over, and it is the exact step that decides whether your tubers grow into big, healthy roots or quietly rot away in soggy soil while you're not looking. Take your bag, lay it out flat, unfolded completely. Using a knife, a skewer, or even a heated nail, if that's what you've got on hand, punch 20 to 24 holes across the bottom third of the bag. Not just a few in the dead center of the base. You want holes across the whole bottom and creeping partway up the lower sides too, because as the season goes on, that soil is going to settle and compact, and you need drainage that extends higher than just the very floor of the bag. Once your holes are punched, fold the top edge of the bag down about 6 inches to form a rolled cuff around the rim. That cuff does 2 things for you. It reinforces the top of the bag so it doesn't tear when you're handling it, and it gives you a clear visual marker of exactly how deep your soil column needs to be. Simple, practical, no waste. Exactly the kind of thinking that's kept old-fashioned farming methods alive and effective for generations. Set your bag in its final growing spot before you fill it, because once it's packed with 50 pounds of moist soil, you are not moving that thing easily. Pick a spot with a minimum of 6 to 8 hours of direct sun a day. Set it on a hard surface, a patio, a driveway, a wooden deck, anywhere solid. Do not set it directly on grass or bare earth, because that invites slugs, and worse, it gives roots an escape route right through the drainage holes into the ground below, which completely defeats the purpose of growing in a contained system in the first place. Hard surface only, remember that. Now let's talk about what actually goes inside that bag, because this is where a lot of people quietly sabotage their own harvest without even knowing it. Standard bagged potting mix from the store will grow sweet potatoes. I won't lie to you about that. But it will not grow you 50 pounds of sweet potatoes. It's simply not built for this specific plant's needs. Sweet potatoes need 3 very particular things from their growing medium. They need excellent drainage, because tubers sitting in soggy, saturated soil develop soft rot and rough, corky skin that tanks your yield quality. They need a loose, crumbly texture because dense, compacted soil physically blocks a tuber from expanding to its full size, the same way tight shoes stunt a growing foot. And they need the right nutrient balance, meaning higher in potassium and phosphorus, and deliberately low in nitrogen. This last part trips up so many well-meaning gardeners. High nitrogen pushes sweet potato plants into producing gorgeous, lush, sprawling vines with almost nothing happening underground. You end up with a beautiful-looking plant and barely anything to harvest. So here's the blend, and this is exactly the kind of resourceful, use-what-you-have thinking that's kept generations of frugal growers self-sufficient. 50% standard potting mix as your base, 30% coarse sand, not fine play sand or beach sand, but coarse builder's sand or horticultural sand, which dramatically improves drainage and keeps that soil loose all season long. 15% perlite for aeration and long-term structure. And if you can get your hands on it, 5% wood ash, straight from a fireplace, a wood stove, or a fire pit. Wood ash is one of the richest natural sources of potassium a gardener can get, completely free, and it directly feeds tuber development instead of vine growth. If wood ash isn't something you have access to, a small amount of kelp meal or green sand worked into your base mix will do the same job. Fill your prepared bag with this blend to within 8 inches of that rolled cuff you made earlier. Leave that gap. Don't fill it all the way. I'll explain exactly why that gap matters in a few minutes, and trust me, it's one of the most important tricks in this entire system. Now, the slips. And here is a mistake that costs people literally half their potential harvest, and almost nobody explains why it happens. A sweet potato slip is not a seed. It's a rooted cutting, a piece of stem with leaves attached and a young root system forming. And here's the key detail that changes everything once you understand it. Every single node along that stem that ends up buried underground has the potential to form its own tuber. Read that again in your head. Every buried node can grow its own tubers. That means the more stem you bury, the more separate tuber sites you create, and the bigger your total harvest becomes. Most beginners plant a slip the way they'd plant any regular seedling. Dig a small hole, drop the root ball in, cover it, leave the rest of the stem standing up in the air. That approach only gives you tuber formation right at that one small root ball, maybe 3 to 5 tubers if you're lucky. That's it. The right way, the way that actually multiplies your harvest, is horizontal planting. Lay the slip down sideways along the soil surface instead of standing it up. Bury the entire stem, from the root end all the way up to the last couple sets of leaves, at a depth of about 3 to 4 inches. Leave only the very top 2 or 3 sets of leaves poking up above the soil. Every node you just buried along that horizontal stem becomes its own tuber initiation point. A slip with 6 buried nodes can give you 6 separate tuber sites, and each site can produce anywhere from 1 to 3 tubers on its own. Do that math. 2 slips, planted this way, in one bag, and you're already looking at the foundation for a genuinely massive harvest. This isn't a trick or a hack. It's simply understanding how the plant actually grows and working with that biology instead of ignoring it. Water gently right after planting, using a watering can with a soft rose head rather than a hard direct stream that could displace your shallow buried slip. Now let's talk about water, because this is where patience really gets tested. And patience, if you've noticed anything about the old, self-sufficient way of doing things, is always the quiet ingredient behind the biggest results. Sweet potatoes are drought-tolerant once they're established, but don't confuse drought-tolerant with drought-loving, misunderstanding that one distinction is responsible for more disappointing harvests than almost anything else on this list. For the first 2 weeks after planting, water consistently and generously. Your slips are building their root systems, and they need reliable moisture to push those roots down deep. Check daily. Push a finger about 4 inches into the soil near the edge of the bag, away from the plant itself so you don't disturb anything. Dry at 4 inches, water deeply. Moist at 4 inches, leave it alone. After those first 2 weeks, once you start seeing strong vine growth up top, shift your strategy. Let the top 3 to 4 inches of soil dry out completely between waterings, then water deeply until it's actually running out through the drainage holes at the bottom. This deep and dry cycle does something really important. That dry period tells the plant it can't count on surface moisture, so the roots respond by chasing water deeper into the bag. And that downward chase is exactly what drives your tubers deeper and bigger. Deep tubers have more room to expand, less compaction pushing against them, and they simply grow larger as a result. It's a slower, more disciplined approach, but it's exactly the kind of patient, deliberate care that separates a decent harvest from an extraordinary one. And I want to ask you something here, honestly, because I think it matters. How many of you have given up on a container garden too early because you didn't see results in the first few weeks? Tell me in the comments, because if that's you, I want you to understand something right now. This method rewards patience more than almost any other gardening technique I've ever taught. If you rush it, if you get impatient, you will absolutely undercut your own harvest. So commit to the process now before you're 3 weeks in and tempted to give up. Let me give you a piece of advice here that I wish someone had told me the first time I tried this. Keep a simple written log. Nothing complicated, just a scrap of paper taped near your bag or a page in a small notebook. Write down the day you planted, the day you first watered deeply, the day you saw yellowing begin. That habit of writing things down by hand, rather than trusting your memory or an app that might not even be open when you need it, is exactly the kind of low-tech discipline that keeps a self-sufficient household running smoothly year after year. When you plant your second bag next season, or your 10th, that little notebook becomes more valuable than any online guide because it's built entirely from your own soil, your own climate, and your own results. I also want to warn you about a mistake that trips up even experienced gardeners once they move to bag growing: overcrowding. It's tempting, when you see how well this method works, to cram 3 or 4 slips into one bag, hoping for an even bigger harvest. Resist that urge. 2 slips per standard contractor bag is the sweet spot. Overcrowd the bag, and you force the root systems to compete with each other for the same limited soil volume. And instead of a handful of big, healthy tubers, you end up right back where we started, a scattered mess of small, underdeveloped roots. More is not always better. Disciplined restraint, giving each plant exactly the room it needs and nothing more, is precisely the kind of thinking that built entire self-reliant farming traditions long before anyone worried about maximizing yield per square foot on a spreadsheet. One more piece of advice while we're here, and this one's about pests, because nobody likes finding out too late. Check the underside of your leaves once a week for aphids or small chewing insects. In a contained bag system, a light insecticidal soap made from a few drops of mild dish soap in a spray bottle of water is usually all you need, applied early in the morning before the sun gets strong. You don't need harsh chemicals for a system this small and this well contained. A little vigilance, a 5-minute check once a week, prevents 90% of the problems people run into. That's it. That's the whole pest strategy. Simple, consistent, low cost, exactly the way it should be. Now let's talk about the vines, because this is where a lot of people, without even realizing it, quietly wreck their own harvest. By week 4 to 6, your bag is going to be producing long, healthy, sprawling vines, sometimes reaching 6 to 8 feet by the middle of summer. And here's the decision point that determines everything. If you let those vines sprawl freely and touch bare ground anywhere near your bag, they will root right into the earth wherever they land. And once that happens, your plant is now feeding 2 completely separate root systems, one inside your bag and one scattered randomly outside it in the ground. The plant divides its energy between both. Your bag tubers shrink. Your ground tubers come out small and scattered. Your total harvest drops, sometimes dramatically. The fix for this is something called vine lifting or vine rolling, and it takes maybe 10 minutes every week to 10 days. Simply walk around your bag, gently lift any vine that's touched the ground, and coil it loosely back around the base of the plant instead of letting it root outside the bag. This one small habit repeated consistently, keeps 100% of your plant's energy focused on the tubers you're actually going to harvest, instead of scattering that energy into the dirt around your patio. And this is also the exact moment to bring back that 8-inch gap I told you to leave earlier. Remember that. At week 4, add a 3-inch layer of your soil blend into that gap. At week 8, add another 2 to 3 inches on top of that. Every time you add soil, you're burying a fresh section of stem, and every fresh section of buried stem creates more tuber initiation points, exactly the same way it did when you first planted horizontally. This hilling technique, combined with consistent vine lifting, is what takes a good harvest and pushes it into something genuinely remarkable. Don't skip it. Don't rush it. Hill at week 4. Hill again at week 8. Lift your vines regularly in between, and then let the plant quietly do the rest of the work on its own. Now, how do you know when it's actually time to harvest? Because this is another spot where impatience ruins an otherwise great crop. People see lush green vines and assume that means the potatoes underneath must be ready, and they tear the bag open way too early, only to find dozens of small, underdeveloped potatoes that genuinely needed another 3 or 4 weeks. Sweet potatoes need somewhere between 100 and 120 frost-free days from the day you plant your slips to full maturity. Mark your planting date. Count forward from there. That gives you your earliest realistic harvest window, but don't rely on the calendar alone. Watch the plant itself. The first sign is yellowing in the lower leaves, starting from the oldest growth at the base of the vine. A natural progression, not disease, not drought stress. That yellowing means the plant is redirecting its energy downward, finishing up vine production and consolidating everything into the tubers below. The second sign is dieback at the vine tips, where the newest growth starts to shrivel instead of pushing out fresh leaves. Once you see that, you're within about 2 weeks of harvest. And the third sign, the most reliable one, is what I call the soil pull test. Reach carefully into the soil near the edge of the bag, feel for a tuber, and check the skin. If it feels firm and smooth, set rather than soft, that skin has cured and you're ready. If your thumbnail can easily scratch through it, give it more time. And now, the part this whole system was built for. Harvest day. Picture this with me for a second. You're standing in front of your bag. The vines have yellowed. The tips have died back. It's been around 110 days since you tucked 2 small slips into a $2 contractor bag. You grip the base, you tip the whole thing sideways onto a hard surface, and you peel it open. What comes tumbling out is not a scattered handful of small, disappointing roots. It's a dense, tightly packed column of interlocking sweet potatoes, some as thick as your forearm, packed so closely together that a few of them actually grew wrapped around each other. You start pulling them apart, counting as you go. 8, 12, 15, more. You weigh them out. 20 pounds, 30, 40, and in a properly executed system, with the right blend, the horizontal planting method, consistent vine lifting, hilling at the right weeks, and that patient deep and dry watering cycle, 50 pounds from a single contractor bag from 2 slips that cost you a couple dollars is not an exaggeration at all. It's simply the natural result of understanding the biology and giving the plant exactly what it needs. Nothing more, nothing wasted, the same disciplined, no-frills approach that's kept self-reliant growers feeding their families for generations. But don't stop here, because what you do in the next 2 weeks decides whether this harvest lasts you 2 weeks or 6 months. Do not wash your sweet potatoes right after pulling them. Brush off the loose soil gently and leave the rest. Then cure them. Place them somewhere warm, around 80 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit, with decent humidity for 10 to 14 days. Curing does 2 things. It thickens the skin so your potatoes hold up in storage, and it converts some of those starches into sugars, which is exactly what gives a properly cured sweet potato that deep, rich caramel sweetness you're looking for. Skip curing, and your harvest starts breaking down within 2 or 3 weeks. Cure it properly, and you're looking at 6 to 8 months of storage in a cool, dark, dry space. That's the difference between a one-time harvest and genuine food security sitting quietly in your pantry. So let's add it all up. A contractor bag, about $2. Your soil blend, under $10 total, and honestly less if you're using free wood ash and compost you already have on hand. 2 slips, under $5. Total investment, under $15. Potential harvest, 50 pounds of sweet potatoes that can feed a household for months. That's the entire trash bag sweet potato system, built the old-fashioned, self-reliant way, with almost nothing but patience, a bit of know-how, and materials most people already have sitting around their home. And I want you to really sit with this for a second, because this is the part that matters most. This isn't a gardening hack. It's not a viral trick with no real substance behind it. It's applied plant biology dressed up in the simplest, cheapest container you can find. Horizontal slip planting, disciplined vine lifting, hilling at the right time, the deep and dry watering rhythm, proper drainage, a low nitrogen soil blend. Every single piece of this system exists because sweet potato plants respond to specific, predictable conditions in specific, predictable ways. Learn the biology behind it, apply the system with discipline, and the harvest takes care of itself. That's the same quiet wisdom that's kept generations of resourceful, self-sufficient growers feeding their families without ever needing anything fancy. So here's what I want from you now. Are you actually going to build this system this season? Tell me honestly in the comments, yes or no. And if yes, which variety are you planting? Beauregard, Covington, Georgia Jet, or maybe something local to your region that I might not even know about? I genuinely want to hear it. And if you already commented your country or your city earlier in this video, tell me again down here, because somebody scrolling through these comments right now is on the fence about trying this for the first time, and your answer, your experience, your little corner of the world might be exactly the nudge they need to finally start. If this video actually helped you, if you feel like you understand this method deeper than you did 25 minutes ago, do me a favor and share it with one person who told you container gardening could never produce real, serious food. Because 50 pounds from a $2 trash bag is about as real as food production gets, and it deserves to be seen by more than just the algorithm. Subscribe if you want more of this patient, practical, old-fashioned way of growing serious food in small spaces, because there's a lot more of this coming. And I'll see you in the next one.